And now we have our final guest from Ukraine. I'm very happy to greet Oleg Novikov here. Oleg doesn't have diabetes himself, but we consider him to be a type F, so friends or family. He's been working in the diabetes space for a while now. Hi, Oleg.
Hi, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Oleg. I'm a designer from My Sugar and volunteer for Insulin for Life Foundation. And I have a short story and presentation for you today. If you can run my slides, it would be awesome, because I have many photos that I want to share with you. I have a short personal story about war, insulin, and volunteering. Next slide, please. So like many stories before me, I was waking up at 4 a.m. at this date to the news of cruise missiles falling on Kyiv, my home. My social media was filled with cries for help, and this is basically what I saw this morning. And the map on the right side, those are just the places where the rockets have hit just this morning alone. Next slide, please. One of those rockets fell down near the house of my uncle, blowing up his windows, and immediately this all became very personal. And next slide. For first 2 days, I was in shock. I was trying to reach my friends and relatives and understand what I could do, looking for any useful information and seeing many people fleeing the cities. Next slide, please. One of my friends with diabetes escaped to the village near Kiev, and those photos that you see right now are not from news. Those are the photos from his basement. He found that he himself was on the front lines accidentally, because this was the line of the Russian advance. They were hiding in the cellar for days, trying to reinforce it in case the bombs fall, that they will not be dug under their own house. And this is when I realized that during the war, there are many things that you depend on, like insulin, that you cannot get in such places like this blocked village, which was surrounded by Russians. This is when, being desperate, I reached out to my sugar colleagues and wrote to Roche leadership, even asking for help. And my colleagues immediately gathered what diabetes supplies they had, as you have seen on the previous slide, that we could prepare a small care package and send it to Ukraine. We took a car with my wife and took a 9-hour journey. And during this journey, we were on our phones nonstop, coordinating, finding volunteers within the country to get this package to people who actually need it. As was told before me, no postal service was working at the time. This is why we found out volunteers who were ready to help us and bring this package directly to people. Those photos that you see right now were shared with me later from some of the supply runs. I have many photos like this, to be honest. It's just to show that people who were doing those deliveries in those first days of war were actually risking their lives. And next slide, please. A day after this journey, we received our first photo with confirmation of delivery. Here are paramedics around Kyiv holding the insulin that we have sent, and they were delivering this insulin to people who cannot care for themselves, like old people or people in blocked villages. Next. Yeah. So after that, and after this journey, next slide, please, I made the connection to Insulin for Life Foundation, who were inspired by me making this delivery. And we have got our first case of delivering a large package of insulin into Ukraine. This is me and Sarah from Insulin for Life Austria. And next slide, please. And this is our first delivery into Ukraine to the Ministry of Health distribution center. It was approximately 500 insulin pens and various other diabetic supplies. And this is how our collaboration started. Next slide, please. So while we were waiting for our next delivery, we were just buying out the pharmacies in Vienna, collecting money from church of St. Barbara's in Austria, collecting donations by kind people of Vienna to prepare another care package and send it out. Next slide, please. And this is this package getting to Kharkiv on the left side. This is suburbs of Kharkiv, the village of Pokotilivka. And on the right side, those same donations are in Vinnytsia, which was a major transport hub. Next slide, please. After that, we were lucky enough to deliver a very huge care package of hundreds of insulin pens from Insulin for Life US that we have sent out to Zaporizhia in response to life-saving requests, because we knew already and we have confirmed that there were children in Zaporizhia who did not have enough access to insulin. Next slide, please. And After efforts from our volunteers, this insulin safely got to the hospital, and you can see the doctors here holding it. Next slide, please. A big chunk of this insulin donation was later separated from the hospital and delivered into occupied territories by our volunteers, who basically sneaked it through the front lines. And next slide, please. After that, we also tried to focus more on the east, more on the blocked villages or villages under the Russian occupation. Here's a slide from Kherson, where we managed to deliver a box of insulin from Insulin for Life Luxembourg to a children's hospital in Kherson. Next slide, please. And next one. And here's a slide with Neil from Insulin for Life Australia and his package on the right side after he traveled half the planet and arrived to Vienna. This is the same boxes, which were later packed into thermal containers to prepare individual care packages for small communities. Every care package had needles, insulins, a little bit of test strips, and insulins of long-acting and short-acting kinds to supply people with everything that they might need. And this is how we sent it out from Vienna using, again, more volunteers from a taxi service who just shipped it out to the border and gave it to the hands of our friends. Next slide. And then we started distribution of this insulin to the villages like Bucha, Hostomel, villages around Odessa, villages around Kharkiv, basically to all small communities who were at time forgotten by everybody else and did not receive centralized help. Next slide, please. And I have many, many pictures like this with people who are holding those packages. And personally, I find this very inspiring and heartwarming. Next slide. Those are photos that you see right now. Those are from Bucha, and they were taken right after the liberation by Ukrainian forces. Those were the first days, and even before, we all knew what actually happened there. Next slide. And more pictures from the same places, and I have hundreds more. I want to share one last case study with you. Next slide, and the next one. I was lucky enough to receive a 250 kilogram pallet of pump supplies, infusion sets, reservoirs, and everything else that you need as a pump user from Insulin for Life US. And I was lucky enough to make connection, next slide, with Medtronic Ukraine, who had information about their current pediatric users. It so happens that most of the Medtronic pumps in Ukraine are used by children. And after the start of the war, many of those children changed their place of residence. Many people fled to the West, and we didn't know how to reach them. But Medtronic knew this. So we established collaboration with Endocrinology Center in Lviv, coordination with Medtronic, and then we started targeted distribution of care packages of pump supplies to children specifically across the whole Ukraine. Next slide. So here are a few pictures of children after receiving those packages. I have many, many photos like that. You can switch to the next slide. Of course, not everybody sends the photos, but we have literally thousands of recipients. And I'm very lucky that I had the opportunity to participate in something like this. And currently, next slide, please. We have much more donations coming in from Insulin for Life. We're going to continue distribution of pump supplies, and we're going to continue to focus on the eastern parts which are suffering from war. And the picture that you see in front of you was paid by children, and it says, "Thank you for the treasure and thank you for help." That's all. Thank you for having this chance to speak to you today.
Thank you so much for sharing all that, Oleg. I have the behind-the-scenes view here right now, and I don't see any dry eyes. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. I mean, Oksana showed us the little paper slips, and for people with diabetes, those little paper slips mean so much. They mean life. They're a treasure. So that is amazing to see. We all applaud you, and thank you for coming.